For more on the situation on the Korean Peninsula, I'm joined from San Francisco by Paul Carroll. He is Program Director of the Plowshares Fund, an organization that works to promote a world free of nuclear weapons. Thanks for joining us, Paul.
My pleasure, Elaine.
Before we get into the rhetoric, I want to ask you, since the DPRK's third nuclear test last month, is there any more insight into whether this country has made any progress with its nuclear capabilities? In other words, does it have a weapon?
Well, it's an excellent question. We know very little about the nuclear program, and this really is one of the biggest deficits we have is understanding and the knowledge about North Korea, about its programs. What we do know is based on some of the visits, some of the presence we had inside the country up until a few years ago. Now, this most recent test was the most successful, shall we say. It was the largest. But what we don't know is whether it was made from plutonium or highly enriched uranium. These are the two types of materials that one can make a bomb out of. There were no trace gases discovered, and so it's a big question mark as to how sophisticated this last test actually was.
You know, these U.S. and South Korean joint exercises, they're not a surprise, especially with the U.S. pivot to Asia. It's pretty publicized. Were the military exercises simply an excuse for the DPRK to respond in the way that it has lately?
I would characterize it this way. It is an annual exercise with South Korea and the United States, and typically this time of year the North Koreans can be expected to increase the rhetoric around their Workers' Party assembly and so on. But there are a couple of things that are notably different this time, and that is the most recent nuclear test in mid-February, the concerted UN response, including China, that agreed to sanctions. They didn't press to water things down. They went in line with the other members of the Security Council. And I frankly disagree with the statements coming out of the administration. To send B-52s and B-2s over to South Korea, it is different. It's characteristically different than what we've done in the past. These are clearly nuclear-capable instruments. And so it's partly a response directly to what North Korea is doing, but it's also clearly a signal or a message to South Korea that, hey, you can rely on us. And while it does send those messages very clearly, it actually ratchets up the situation even more so. It makes it more dicey.
Well, I want to ask you about that because, the U.S. is continuing these military exercises knowing it will likely provoke the DPRK. Why are they continuing to do so then?
Well, the exercises themselves are planned out months and months in advance. They're scheduled. And so to stop or suspend them at this point would be actually sort of counterproductive. It would create, dissension in the ranks, if you will, between the alliance. My point is a bit different. What we have done by sending B-52s and B-2s to the area is, I believe, gone above and beyond what we really needed to do to shore up the alliance with South Korea. And it's sort of like cutting butter with a chainsaw, if you will. We didn't need to do that to make clear to North Korea that we are prepared to respond if we're attacked.
Well, we have about a minute left, and I just want to get your thoughts on what you think will happen next, because there's been a lot of talk lately about making a mistake. Nobody wants to make a mistake that would set this off further.
So I 3 points. The first is, you're absolutely right. The situation on the peninsula is very tense right now, but it also is very complicated. And so an errant gunshot, an errant missile in the exercise, a misunderstanding, a misunderstood field command is exactly the kind of thing that can lead to military confrontation or even a war. So that's something we need to dial back from. You asked me what I think will happen. I think there are two paths here. One is exactly what I just described, that there is some kind of an unintentional skirmish, and we need to make sure we can manage that and control it and not have it expand into a war. The second path is figuring out how to get on the same page with Beijing, with China, frankly, and engaging and making overtures to North Korea and saying, look, none of us want a war here. Let's figure out what it is that they really want, what they're after, and be able to walk back from this through discussions, through negotiation, and not have shots fired.
All right, Paul Carroll from Plowshares, we appreciate your time as always.